KC Singh, a senior diplomat, now joins me here on the show, and Hamza Amir is joining me from Islamabad. Mr. Singh, let me start with you. Abdul Basit says, let's talk development. Let's not talk about what happened in the past, let's talk development. But at the same time, he says, don't set any preconditions, knowing fully well what the BJP has been consistently keeping as its stand. Isn't this like almost dictating the terms, something that Islamabad has done all along?
I think there's a certain concern in Pakistan. They've conveyed it indirectly. They didn't extend the visas of two Indian journalists based in Islamabad, and no particular reason was given for that. There's also been breach of ceasefire. We've just seen an encounter in Jammu and Kashmir today. It continued for a sufficient amount of time. So some heating up of the LOC would be there. Now there is concern there because they are reacting to what was a very hectic and long election campaign here in which all kinds of things were said. And they need not have done that. They could have waited a bit longer, because I think this is a period when the PM designate, who really hasn't fleshed out in detail what his vision is. These are very general statements when you talk of how you want to deal with the neighborhood. He has not fleshed it. We don't know who the minister will be, external affairs minister will be, who the national security advisor will be, what kind of a team he has. This is a very delicate moment of transition. It would have been better if the Pakistan High Commissioner had not commented so early. They should have waited for this government to settle down and to really normalize their rhetoric, which is still somewhere in between the campaigning mode and the governing mode. They still haven't come to that.
Okay.
Therefore, catching them very early will just create a counter-reaction. It's not worthwhile.
Hamza Amir, I want to ask you the point that KC Singh has raised. What is the urgency in Islamabad to come out with these statements saying it depends on whether we want to bury the hatchet or continue to be daggers drawn? We don't even have a government in place till now. What's the urgency in Islamabad?
Well, there are three reasons behind it. One is that in Pakistan there is an uproar across the media in which, one of the channels is the target, and they're proclaiming them as traitors and also being funded by India to campaign on their own agendas. And that is why, small things that come out of India are being discussed on the media in Pakistan. When Narendra Modi was declared as winner, Pakistani media actually started talking over what comes next for Pakistan and how will Pakistan actually take this forward. There were rallies taken out which were basically opposing the fact that Pakistan should take a stronger and rigid stance against India with the newly government. So it was, I think, at a point of where the government was compelled to actually read out and narrate out its policy statement that came out, that on one part the government actually will show its willingness to continue the talks and strategic talks with India, but obviously it will have a lot of resistance not only from the Indian side, and also it will have a lot of resistance from internal elements inside Pakistan, from the religious groups, from pressure tactics, from pressure groups itself. Hafiz Saeed was in Islamabad yesterday, and he was attending a huge convention talking all about India and nothing else, that Pakistan will have to define the pointers which will actually it will keep forward when it starts talking to India. So there is a lot of pressure on Pakistan that they had to come out with a policy statement, but I don't think it is a very realistic one.
Okay, it might not be a realistic one. Brijesh Pandey is joining us from the BJP headquarters. Brijesh, how has the BJP taken this? Are they surprised by the fact that Pakistan has perhaps jumped the gun in trying to ask India and the new government even before the government has been formed?
Well, they are a bit puzzled because, nobody was expecting Pakistan High Commissioner to come up and issue a statement like this when even, the normal process of electing the Prime Minister is yet to take place, and the new government is yet to be formed. So they are a bit taken aback, but one thing remains for sure, that given the kind of position which has been taken by Narendra Modi during election rallies, they are saying that they can't be seen in public as somebody who is taking a very soft view. I mean, a real politic and diplomacy will take its own course, but publicly the kind of position they had taken, they can't be seen compromising with that kind of thing. They called Manmohan Singh a weak prime minister because they were beheading of a Indian soldier, and the government of India couldn't do much about it. And this was the underlying message which was given at several political rallies. So yes, this statement by the Pakistan High Commissioner do put them in a spot. Maro?
Mr. Singh, as far as Narendra Modi is concerned, he has made it very clear that there's going to be no talk with Pakistan till terror camps are dismantled. Given the kind of statement that has come from Abdul Basit, what do you see as the Narendra Modi government's reaction likely to be?
I don't think that's a very realistic stand, as much as the stand of the UPA government when they came in saying that talk should go on despite terrorism. Neither that is correct nor this can be correct, because otherwise you have locked yourself into a corner where the Pakistan government today, compared to say 98 when Mr. Vajpayee came in, is probably even unable to control the terror network. It's a much more complicated scenario. They can certainly attempt to control it, but there seems to be a fear in Islamabad to really deal with these groups. We see the Hafiz side is much more openly moving about. He's making statements. He's even deciding what the policy of Pakistan should be. Now, in a situation like this, it's difficult. But I think normally it would be any right-wing rhetoric, whether here or abroad or even Reagan, before he came into power, will get moderated when you're in government. And I wish the High Commissioner had not got into this, but we are seeing that the government in Islamabad today probably is reacting to internal domestic pressures. They could have taken a stand there domestically suitably rather than having the High Commissioner articulate it. This will harden positions on both sides, then make it more difficult to climb down. You don't need to climb down, but you have to have maybe dispute resolution is not immediately possible, because we've seen NDA twice. We saw Kargil, then we saw the attack on the parliament. They engaged, then they disengaged. Same thing happened to UPA. Periodic engagement, disengagement when there was terrorism. So you have to find a new way of dealing with each other, a new via media. And to enable the Modi government to devise what that new via media is, which is acceptable and in line with their stand which they've been taking, and yet does not play into the hands of the radical Islamists in Pakistan. That space will have to be figured out in the next few months.
Okay.
But if you go on taking public positions, it will become more difficult.
Okay, very quickly, do you see Narendra Modi travelling to Pakistan, as has been the invite sent by Nawaz Sharif, anytime soon?
What for? You have to prepare prime ministerial visits. If Mr. Manmohan Singh, PM Manmohan Singh could not visit, there's less of a chance of PM Modi going there, because you have to prepare the grounds for it. What is the basis on which he can go? There'll have to be movement on 2611 perpetrators. There would have to be some evidence that that Nawaz Sharif government is really moving to control those groups, Hafiz Saeed, etc., which are baying for India's blood. We don't see that. We see actually a movement in the reverse direction. So something will have to be on the table. Only then you can trade off. Prime ministerial visits are after due preparation, and when they are giveaways, you just don't go there to initiate talks.
Interesting. Mr. K.C. Singh, Brijesh Pandey and Hamza Ahmed, thanks so much for joining me here on Headlines Today this evening.